Hello.
Hey, Thomas. How you doing?
Doing great, thank you. How about you?
I am good. I am good. Really, really enjoying the conversation here in this paper.
Yeah, me too.
Just to give folks another couple minutes to join. Where are you based out of, Thomas?
I'm in Denmark.
Oh, okay. I was
Yeah.
just there a few weeks ago.
Oh.
I was in Copenhagen visiting a customer.
Where are you based?
Chicago.
Okay,
Yeah, I went pretty
cool.
far to visit them.
Did you find good weather or
Yeah,
usual
it's not too
Danish?
bad. Better than Chicago
Okay.
because it's a little warmer because of the seas and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my first time there. I liked it. A lot of bikes.
Yep.
So I know Abby said she was going to join. Raffaele might join too. So just giving a couple more minutes. Probably distracted everybody by replying to threads in the last 20 minutes. But yeah, I finally had some time to catch up.
Yeah, it's a very interesting conversation. It's nice also to have different perspectives and ideas. I really enjoy that.
hmm Yeah, I'm happy how it's coming together. Hey, Abby.
I'm just trying to make some suggestions around one of your replies just now so that we have something to like compare. Thank you for handling all of the inbounds. It's been a lot to juggle, I'm sure.
I knew the past half hour. I was like, I just put all those things. I'm probably distracting everybody.
No,
So,
that's what I felt like last night. I was like, but if I do this in to you, the hour before you're trying to facilitate a conversation, that's even more mean. So I'll do it the day before and hopefully give you time. So
yeah. Overall, it seems like we're noodling on a few points in those first few sections, but I think it's getting close to a point where I could put it in GitHub or something, and we could keep iterating there. I think we're pretty close. Hey, Rafa, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I finally made it.
Yeah, good to have you here. All right, let's go ahead and get. So I think we have a quorum, whatever that means for a year. Thank you all for joining. So if you want to put down here, I put down in this document, that's the platform's Ouija notes, just some things that I wanted to, kind of bring out this time. And I put in a few last time, so that seemed, I was just jotting them down though now. So it's relatively quick thoughts. So first, I guess I want us to talk about, one of the things we talked about last time was, are there two layers to a platform? The layer of collection of capabilities, and then the more composite, scenario specific golden path kind of environments that are built on top. And we kind of said, no, that lower level is not part of the platform. But since then, I've had a few conversations, and I've kind of been liking this idea that maybe both are part of the platform, meaning a platform, may at its most basic just offer you, well, I need a database. Well, I need a Kubernetes namespace. Well, I need a space in Tecton to run my pipelines. And that would be, that could be a basic platform, but then a more advanced platform, a more mature platform might take those, bring them all together to say, okay, this is a developer environment. It's got, database, pipeline, Kubernetes namespace, all, templated out right from the start. So yeah, I guess we could have a discussion about that. I've kind of been changing the doc to kind of reflect that idea. So I guess let's talk about that. What do people think? Or we could talk about it as we go through.
Yeah, I personally I'm in the same opinion as you, that in my mind, they both individual capabilities and the golden paths or standard templates, they are both part of the platform. Perhaps what people have in mind when they say they're not is that typically they will belong to different teams. But I don't map a team to a platform. The platform for me can span multiple teams.
I hear that. I hear that. It might be associated with a specific team. You know how we kind of were touching on that last time is that we ended up saying the platform team never, I mean, they could be, but they're not by definition, they don't manage the underlying implementation of the capability. Like that there might be 10 different teams in your company. You know, one manages pipeline runners, one manages storage, one manages compute or something.
Yeah,
so
I'm not even sure that there is something called the platform team. There could be multiple teams working on multiple capabilities of the platform. If they do a good job and they provide a consistent experience to the end users, that's still a good platform.
I really like the focus on the composition part there. I'm not sure about splitting between individual and composite in very fixed terms, because I think it could be difficult also to define what do we mean by individual. Let's say a database. Is that individual, or is that a composite capability that includes the network, the storage, the security, and the database as well, or not?
Yeah,
don't know about that.
Yeah, my experience has been that there tends to be abstraction layers that grow up and up, right? So it's like that when there are many teams providing capabilities, that you end up with teams that provide capabilities that in their raw form provide value, but are actually their values that much higher when you have a team that composes that experience across like a few of the capabilities, which is what you're talking about, like a dev environment kind of composed platform capability. But
okay, yeah, like we could reflect that idea of the continuum. That's how I'm hearing what Thomas said somehow.
Yeah, and focus maybe on the abstractions that Abby mentioned. Like, yeah, like it in the diagram. Perhaps we have the pipeline service in a very abstract way, or a data service, security vulnerability service, and those are in an abstract way what we compose together in different setups depending on the use case. It could be a full developer platform dealing with applications, but it could be something else, like a deployment platform that the input is a container image already. So what happens before happens outside the platform, and both for use cases, but also for onboarding. I think some teams, when they start onboarding a new platform, they don't necessarily do the whole thing right away, but they go step by step. So they could start onboarding capabilities from the platform, in different steps, different iterations. So having the focus on capabilities and the composition of those capabilities, I think, can help us here address all these different scenarios.
Okay. Yeah, I hear that. This kind of touches on in this last question that I put down is, you know, how much do we want to elaborate on the developer platform, the developer scenario here? Yeah, maybe that's something to think about. Like, even as you guys are talking, like if we had a diagram showing here's the developer platform with this, 6 capabilities, that would be a good way to illustrate, hey, you could also pull out, you don't want the whole thing, you just need 1 or 2 capabilities. That might be a good way to talk about it. I'm going to put that here also. Okay. Let's think about this. That's something I'm thinking about in general, is like how the doc's already 8 pages long, even just in Google Docs. So how do we, how much should we elaborate on that? Another one I wanted to mention that somebody called out is measuring success. That seems like a great idea. That's missing really from here. We kind of say these are, the attributes that would make your platform successful, but how do people measure? I actually could use some insights there. So that's just an open one right now, but I added a bullet for it here. And then the last thing to consider is, developer platforms.
On measuring success.
Yeah.
If it's a platform for developers, isn't the DORA metrics what we use to measure this success of performing, or the ability to perform of developer teams, or are you looking for something else?
I mean, that could be one of them. Yeah. For that, for those scenarios. Measure the reduction in time or increase in, frequency of whatever task it's supposed to be enabling, app development, right? So measure it, the DORA metrics. Okay, I like that. Thank you. Let's put that in.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So Spotify in the article when they presented the golden path, they also mentioned these metrics they use about when onboarding new people, how long does it take to get to 10 pull requests merged and delivered to production? So to test if how effective is the platform in delivering that experience and acceleration of the path to production. I guess next to the DORA metrics that could help tweaking and refining the platform, right, to get to the where we want it to be.
On that Spotify example, I think it's the conversation of, can you identify how often people need to diverge from the platform offerings, right? From like a way that, so there's two levels of divergence, right? There's divergence from the golden path to the underlying resources. And then there's divergence from the underlying resources to other underlying resources. So like you offer Postgres and they want MySQL or NoSQL or whatever, right? And like, how many times do people have to go off platform for things? It's just like any other product, right? When do your people go to a different provider instead of yourself? Can you measure that in some way?
Cool. I kind of think that should be another section. Does that make sense?
I would also recommend.
Sorry.
Go on.
Okay, so if it's my turn, there is also another metric that I use or that I propose to my customers, and that is the number of tickets. If the number of tickets decreases, you're doing a good job.
That's a big indicator of off-platform needs as well, right? Because if people are able to get what they need, they're not, and in a self-service way, they don't need to be talking to you. So that's an indicator of self-service and off-platform breadth as well, right? So really good one.
And one more is or could be the developer satisfaction. That also, like, considering the platform as a product, there's a lot of attention on users that are the developers and surveys and making sure that they're happy.
MPS with all of its awards, you hear that one a lot. The fact that we have a few that argues for a section for it, so that people could contribute on GitHub or something one day. Cool, thank you. So where we left off last time really was section 6. So I'm just going to scroll through relatively quickly the rest. We were just talking what a platform is. This is where it now kind of talks about basic platform with just a collection of individual capabilities and more advanced platform with compositions. So that's the main change there. platform capability providers, that was what we kind of came up with last time to describe the people that go, the teams that go underneath here. And I updated this picture to kind of make those a little bigger and emphasize their role in this.
It's
Any
interesting
feedback, I
that
guess, on the picture?
it's interesting that you took operators and Crossplane and threw them back up in the APIs. Because
Yeah,
I
I
feel
noticed
like those are examples of ways to provide resources. They're not, I get like, are people, I guess the question is, are people providing the end users of the platform asking them to create a Crossplane CRD, or asking them to create a CRD to trigger an operator? Or are they wrapping those in an API that is then leveraging a tool like an operator, like Crossplane, to do the platform work? And that's sort of like where we talk about like the experience of it, and separating the platform implementation from the user experience. Like changing from using Terraform to using Pulumi shouldn't impact a user's experience at all. But when we take those kinds of tools and put them up at the API level, it would change their experience if you were to change from using an operator to using a Helm chart, or vice versa, or whatever, right? Yeah, so I'm just curious what other people think, right? Because I look at that as like a gap where that wouldn't quite fit.
Yeah, I agree with you. Also, for me, it would make sense to have them in provide environments and resources, or at least that's how I think of them, not as an API exposed to the end user.
I will be fully forthcoming and say that that's a gap that myself and my colleagues see, which is why we're building Kratix. So like, don't like take all of what I say with a grain of salt in the fact that I am building a product to try and fill that gap. But that is like, I would love to hear that we don't have that gap, because it saves me a whole lot of development energy. But that's the gap I see.
I think that's exactly, I'm trying to understand from you, Abby,
Yeah.
where you see Kratix being different than, say, Crossplane in that way. So like,
Yeah,
I guess
that's why I put, so just to like put so where it was that all 4 of those logos were in the purple box with provide environments and resources.
Yeah.
And when we switched to APIs, I threw Kratix up to the API level. The reason I did that, or the reason I felt like that was the right place, is because Kratix is a framework that allows the platform team to define an interface with their users backed by whatever tools they want to use. So Kratix is not trying to configure public clouds. That's what Crossplane does well. Use Crossplane. It is not trying to vend databases. That's what the operators for those databases do well. Use them. What we're trying to do is put in a layer of separation between the tools you're choosing to use as a platform team, and how you're choosing to schedule those across quite a large landscape of infrastructure, and the users that are like, I don't care where you put it. I don't care what the tool is that you use. Just give me the thing that I need. And that's where Kratix is. But again, take all of that as its grain of salt. I'm trying not to shoehorn here. But
yeah, what I kind of heard from Rafa, you go, I'll say.
No, I was gonna say, I was just having a similar discussion in my previous meeting. The idea that we were trying that we ended up with is, in a world where everybody is adopting GitOps, perhaps the separation of the user experience versus the actual orchestrator that builds the infrastructure is actually Git, right?
Mhm.
So as the user experience, I need something that is good at making PR on Gits with the content that I need. Perhaps we all have in mind Backstage for that role, but could be something else. Then what's behind that, I don't care as a user, right? But the platform builders, of course, they care, right? And then I don't know Kratix, but if it can play a role in that space. But I know that things like if you're doing GitOps with Kubernetes, then there are GitOps operators that can take that content and put it in the cluster, and then it will hopefully be realized, right?
So what you're saying is that if you put into like a form in Backstage that asks for a few fields, and what that ends up doing is generating a pull request for a CRD of type XRD for Crossplane or whatever, like that would, all the user cares about is they filled in a form in Backstage, and all the platform cares about is that it was able to like take the data from that form and like send it on its way. Like, so
Well,
on.
the platform even cares that there is something in Git. They don't even care how it got there, right? They just have to, their commitment is to take that and make it become true. And it doesn't, if we're talking about Git, Argo and these Kubernetes GitOps operators, then yes, it needs to be a CRD or a CR, right? But it could be other things. Like there are ways to do GitOps with Terraform. I'm told. I'm not sure how to do it, but I'm sure you can do it, right?
Yeah.
So
there's providers.
So this tool that creates the PR could be, committing something else that is not a CR, right?
I think that's where you're 100% right. There's ways to do it with Terraform. I've not done that in Anger like at scale either, so I can't speak too intelligently to it. But I think that since we're writing this for enterprises, I think the idea that they have that everything they do can be done via a CR on Kubernetes is probably unlikely, right? Just being realistic. Like they're going to have things that are going to be not configurable that way. And that's where, in my opinion, putting the tools that are Kubernetes only, kind of like where they can't then orchestrate off Kubernetes stuff or like stuff that can't be configured via the operators and whatnot, is like a limitation. But I don't think it's a big deal, right? Like I think they all are APIs. So I think they're all APIs. It's just at what level of abstraction those APIs are at, and I'm not too stressed about it. I just wanted to call out that I was interested to see those move because I do feel like they're at a slightly different level of abstraction. But totally
I agree with you. I mean, I don't want to say that you have to necessarily create CRs, right? It could be anything that can be interpreted by a GitOps tool. I'm even afraid of saying that you have to have adopted GitOps to have a platform, right? Maybe that's not true, but I think, maybe it's something that we have to discuss. Do we want to push in that direction or not? I think the world is going in that direction, but that's my opinion.
You
So
get reasonable benefits, right? So
I think that way you're using GitOps, Raf, is the way that I'm using the word APIs. In other words, those YAML files that you check into Git are the requests that you send via HTTP. It's just that GitOps, it's a pull model or whatever, event-driven model instead of me, submitting an HTTP request. But ultimately, the stuff that you jot down in YAML files in Git is just an API. I noticed this yesterday. Other people are saying that too. Like they're like, Crossplane is great because it works with GitOps, and I'm like, you mean it uses the Kubernetes API?
It's YAML.
Right, but they're similar.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I like the distinguishing. Like, I guess everything works with APIs, right? All those capabilities, they work with APIs, but the APIs in the blue box there, that's the API we expose to the end user. So I think in that way, I can see that using Radix or Crossplane to do that. But an operator, for example, I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't expose that to the end user. So I would put it perhaps in the other box, provide environments and resources together with Carbell or other tools that still work with APIs and are very useful to package functionality, but not something meant to be exposed to the end user.
So
and then it
possibly
could be
putting
that
Git in the API if we wanted to try and make the point of like GitOps, right? Could be a reasonable.
The API, like if I put stuff in an OCI registry, for example, maybe it's not Git. I monitor
Yeah.
Cause it
an
can be
image
S3,
registry.
right? You don't have to get off, doesn't have to be off of
Yeah.
Git. It can be off of a document store, and yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
I would see that as an implementation detail. So from
True.
the interface in the platform, how do I get to the platform capability deployed? And yeah, of course, most of the times it's that model there, but perhaps at this level, I don't see it important to surface in this picture. Like I look at it more as an implementation detail. At
What
this
I'm
point.
hearing from what I heard from Abby, and I think you're reflecting it, Thomas, also is that the use, it's like, because when I think of Crossplane, I'm like, well, you could build a composition that would look just like a Cradix composition. But I think what Abby is saying is that Crossplane is for cloud resources. So like if that's its target use case, then it doesn't go up here. I might use it that a different way, but like you're saying, the typical use. I'm hearing the same thing on operator framework.
Yeah.
People aren't using operator framework to deploy an entire, environment, even though you could. But
to be fair to Crossplane, it does do off cluster resources, right? Just like Terraform has providers for like PagerDuty, like SaaS providers, right? Like Crossplane has the same potential to do the same thing. It is just the ability to so if you can write a controller for it, it can be in the cluster, right? Like so that I don't want to like pigeonhole Crossplane into only cloud provider things. I don't think it needs to be. I think it's currently heavily in that space, but doesn't need to be. I think the reason why I see a difference there is because it's quite static of like all you can do is throw some YAML at it. What happens if there's like some like imperative actions that you need to take as a part of putting together your platform? Like everyone wants a declarative world, I get it, but not everything's declarative. Like it just isn't. Sometimes you need to do an imperative action, and Crossplane can't support that. And so there will be limitations as to like, you will need to put some sort of something wrapping Crossplane in order to do enterprise level, in my experience, enterprise level kind of stuff. And so, but I'd be comfortable with, I think operators is a fair one, definitely to move into the provide environments and resources. I think, yeah, Crossplane and the Kubernetes logo, I can see going either way, to be honest. I just wanted to have the conversation because it just surprised me, is all. So.
Yeah. No, this makes a lot of sense. And another thing I'm taking from you all right now is that the GUI is going to write according to those APIs. Like there's, I guess that's obvious that they're tied to each other. The GUI is over the API. A lot of the users will interact just with the GUI, but end up with the API. The API bridges from the GUI experience to the implementation. Okay, cool.
And that might be where the advanced users differ, right? More entry level users, they use a simple form, and if you want access to certain capability, like certain fields or whatever, you have to go straight to the API, right? You might not expose 100% of the fields via Backstage, whatever, right? So that might be one of the differentiators of like paved paths, golden paths versus like composed things you can do via the API. That's up to the platform deliverers to decide.
Yeah, I wonder if it should say tools too, because I think of like kubectl, which ultimately is just using the APIs directly. Maybe that's worth combining here. Okay, let's keep going. Just being conscious of time. We talked about why a platform is valuable last time. I think the one thing that we added really here was, this is a comment that you, Abby, were, oh, I see you have some here, which I didn't look, but that the reuse and sharing is another value. So people could switch teams, new products could be developed faster because the person that's on team A can switch to team B and get started on day one. Mm-hmm. That seemed worth calling out independently. It seems different than the rest. Next, this also kind of reflected that change to like individual this has got a little tricky in individual capabilities, using individual capabilities, and then composing capabilities, and here focusing on developer platform. Actually, I think Ralph, this started with your list of items, and there's probably room to iterate on what exactly goes here. I know you had a comment on mine, Abby, like what's the difference between number 1 and number 3, and it was like inner loop and outer loop was my main
which was totally fair. took a stab at changing the vocabulary a little bit to call more attention to that. Feel free to accept or decline those, but that was, yeah, totally fair answer. I just didn't catch that my first read, so I was hoping to make that a bit clearer for the next read.
Yeah, and this might be, we were talking before about elaborating on these use cases, this might be a place where a diagram or something would help, and, developer elaborate a little more on developer platform. I guess I'm just putting that out there. If somebody wants to take a shot at that, or I might in the next little while too. Let's see, attributes of platforms. He did add this one. See my comment there, see what you think. He was suggesting that the product teams can scale better. And I suggested maybe that goes back up in the values up at the top here, because there we had talked about dedicating teams to platform capabilities. Yeah, so I did add this. We wanted to use the word product in that first one. I guess, I hope that's okay. We moved this up to here. Automatable, we added. This could be GitOps, could be pipelines, whatever. And then be optional, which I just put as, you should be able to get outside. Okay. Keeping going down, attributes of platform teams. I know, Rafa, you had said at the beginning, so we can pick up what you had said here. You don't think there is a platform team necessarily, which I hear. I kind of want to bring that up again for discussion here. I think you were saying you don't need a platform team if all of the capability teams can cooperate amongst themselves to is that what you're kind of saying? You're muted, by the way, if you're talking, Rob.
That's a desirable outcome. Consistency is a desirable outcome. What I see in the field is that when you take this challenge, this building a platform task seriously, it becomes so broad in scope so quickly that it's hard to imagine a team that can do everything, right? So I have a customer that is trying to do it, and it's probably not going to work very soon, right? At some point, it's just too large, right? Building pipeline is very different than monitoring application, like completely different set of skills, right? But those two capabilities for me are capabilities that should come out of the platform as I look at the platform as a developer. But when we look at the implementation, it could be two different teams, right?
Two different teams. So you're saying you not only do you need a platform team, but you might need several components of it.
Yeah. My point was on my stress, maybe it wasn't clear, was on the A platform team, but versus more than one, right? I think there will be multiple teams working at the platform level. That's how I would say it, right? As opposed to building applications that provide value directly to the business, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay, so and I hear that because I'll tell you what I was thinking is, have you ever heard of like thinnest viable platform? It's come up in a couple of places, but the idea that the platform is relatively thin. So I was thinking like, if that platform team can be really thin, then it can spread over all of these capabilities. But what I think I'm hearing from you, Raf, is that that's wishful thinking, because the domains are too different. Even if you're just managing the interface to the capabilities, you got to have a different understanding if you're doing observability and if you're doing pipelines.
You'd end up with like a backstage team, but actually the people who should be making the backstage components are the teams that are delivering the components behind there, right? Rather than having a team that's in charge of backstage components, you'd have a team that's like, every team should do full stack delivery, right? From the like user interface for their product as well, or their service, as well as down to like the implementation and delivery and operations of it.
Yeah, that's actually what I was saying. And the platform team is the herder of cats, is the team that says, hey, every capability team, you must, provide a backstage plugin. You must provide a cross-plane API, a Kubernetes API, or a Terraform manifest. Can we reduce the platform team to being an aggregation of everything underneath? Or
I
is
sort of
that the
agree
first
with,
place?
I sort of agree with Rafa that like I would prefer the language being around the multiple teams than the thinnest team. The reason I say that is because it's like what you're describing there has been solved in different ways at different orgs. Sometimes it's a thin team, right? Sometimes it's a collection of like tech leads from each of the teams that like collaborate on like what are standards, right? And then it's like a shared standards document. And like I think you're right that there. So Rafa, you were saying standards matter, like consistency matters. I agree with that statement. And Josh, you were saying one very reasonable way to solve that problem, but I think there's other reasonable ways to solve it that can include multiple teams. And so maybe it is just focusing on that point you were making, Rafa, around the consistency and like versus the like exact number or exact shape of the teams.
Yeah. No, I feel there is things that we still have to learn in this space. Like we're talking about team topologies here, about when you build platform. It's still, I don't have a ready to go solutions. I just see that maybe a few customers start with a single team, right? But it doesn't scale. It's not a good way to scale. It becomes
Is their single team focused on Backstage or an API? Meaning, are they starting from like the far outside in? Can we maybe phrase it like that?
In my experience, you first build a platform and then perhaps you put a UI in front of it.
Okay.
So yeah, and you can absolutely have a Backstage team. That's not a big deal, right? But the platform, that for me, that's just a portal. That's just a UI. There's much the mid is below, right? And that's where I see very hard to give all of the responsibilities to a single team.
Okay. Yeah, I was more getting at like if we, focus on the end goal first. Our end goal really is that Backstage UI with all of this heavy lifting behind, obviously, but the press release, that's something that so that they like to say.
Yeah.
So the press is Backstage.
I know Backstage is what everybody sees and what everybody remembers, but it's just what's the saying? Sugar on the cake, right? Icing on the cake, right?
Lipstick on a pig. Yeah, I always want to use.
No, that's a little derogative. It's a good Backstage is a good thing, but it's just the final touch to give you good experiences. That's not where the actual action is, right?
I'm kind of asking, like, should we phrase this section to be the top responsibility of the platform team is that consistent experience, even though and they will be deeper into what comes behind it. In that, should we reflect kind of those two roles? Like they own that top level, but and then where you guys are kind of getting, like, they're going to also have to get into the deeper levels too. Is that
I wouldn't go too much into how they are organized, at least in this context, but more on, as you said, the responsibility. Since we treat the platform as a product, we have product management. So there's one single point of contact for the product teams that want to have an idea about the platforms and consistency and all of that. But perhaps we can just be generic about platform teams, plural, but without going into details on how they could be organized, because I guess that varies a lot depending on the type of organization.
One thing you just said, Thomas, I want to pick up on, though. You kind of said the app teams might want a single point of contact, which rings pretty true. Like if we end up with 10 platform teams, we might end up with 10 experiences in the same way we're trying to avoid. So,
and I guess that's what we do with normal software products. Even if there are multiple teams working on different microservices or whatever, still as a customer, I have one point of contact, and there's one product manager typically that ensure the consistency, the roadmap, the vision for the whole product, and the customer don't see how behind the scenes everything is organized. Then here we're talking about internally, so perhaps and still it's different, I know, but that product mindset
but when you get to that scale that you're talking about, you probably don't know the ins and outs, right? Even though it's internally. Like when you get to the point where you're needing 5-10 more platform teams, all like in their own capabilities, you're going to be in the space where someone just needs a point of contact. And then that person, that's your customer service team. And then your customer service team should know how to filter out the conversation to the people, right? This is just a product. Everything that sits for products sits for this. And it should be built to the scale your product is built to. If you've got tens of developers versus you've got hundreds versus you've got thousands, you're going to build a different level of product delivery and customer support and all of those things, right? So, yeah.
I feel like what I am coming out from is I'd like to like mention, I don't know if it's mentioned the product manager role somehow, like try to say that there is a point of contact for the app teams. Like there is, you know, one channel really for them to get to send feedback in, to find out roadmap.
And that's like the product owner role, right? But
yeah,
analogous to this.
Oh, hey, Colin.
Yeah, sorry.
I only see 4 of them, I think. Yeah, product owner, product manager. Okay. I guess I want to kind of see if we can.
Like in smaller teams, you have a situation where it's probably an app dev guy that's grown into a role where he's put a bunch of CI/CD systems together, and this has evolved to a thing like the platform. And they may graduate into a position where they just own that, where they just become the de facto point of contact, at least in a smaller team context. And in this case, it's, and again, back at smaller companies and the folks that are going to be adopting this, not necessarily from like the big company down, that are adopting this mindset, it might be done by committee at first as well. And so in my head, it's focusing on those roles and responsibilities like you guys are mentioning is the key thing here. And I think you may get to a point where you have a team that is dedicated, and maybe that's like when you have a platform team, this is what a team would look like, but it's not necessary that you name somebody the platform team or the platform engineer.
Yeah. I think it might even be more if you do end up with more than one platform team managing different capabilities, then you have to start thinking about coherence across them. Okay, I think that's putting the role or responsibility down here somehow. I think that's what I'm going to take away. So let's noodle on that a little bit more. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to capabilities of platforms. This was the last topic, and I want to get the thoughts here. So the idea here, I know Abby had brought up, maybe we should split this out. You know, the idea here for me is like, I'm a platform engineer or an enterprise architect, and I want to assess like, is my platform, or, you know, whatever somebody's proposing to me for a platform, does it have, you know, what my developers are going to need to be successful? You know, kind of a checklist of things that they, you know, should have, must have, you know, should be on the lookout for. So that's why I kind of felt like it should go here, you know, to kind of inform that, like, this is the meat of the platform. Yeah. So yeah, with that, I put that down. The goal of this as a guide platform team is determining what should be or included in their platform. We can work on the phrase, but I guess working through them, I'll just read them. Web portal, like, so every platform should have a web portal. I hear put provisioning and observing. That's kind of what I think, you know, would end up the portal. This goes back to what we were saying before, APIs and CLIs, which are actually the force behind the portal also. I think we've all agreed on that. Golden Path templates. I guess this isn't required technically. And in fact, we just had a presentation at Red Hat last week of a place that didn't really have any Golden Path templates. They just offered a lot of individual capabilities. But this is like probably a should have, like, you know, and maybe that's like a maturity.
That's just best practices.
Yeah, I guess several of these could be optional depending on the use case. I would say even the web portal, like if the team is fine to use a CLI and doesn't have the need for a portal, for example, simple use case, I don't know, it could be optional in that situation.
Yeah, I hear you. That might be worth somehow, it doesn't have to be a huge deal, but somehow indicating some of these are more optional and some of them are like basic. I think we'd all agree APIs are basic. And then these next couple, automation for, and I split these into two. Let's talk about that. Automation for building and testing and automation for delivering and verifying. I guess, kind of thinking about building and testing is more pipelines, your MVN install or NPM build, your mochas and jests and JUnits kind of testing, maybe Jenkins or Tekton more. And then the next one is more delivery, where I'm kind of leaning more to the GitOps tools and reconcilers, verifying. I think of Kepton, and other like observability systems, chaos tests.
I think the word is used to CI and CD for this concept. I'm not sure if I would change. I am slightly against I'm okay with using building and delivering in place of CI and CD, right? It's more or less the same context. And testing and verifying is, I think there are many more ends. If we want to start to be detailed, I wouldn't do it here. If you want to tell people how to build their CI pipelines, it's a book in and of itself, right? Yeah. But
would it be better to not talk about these at all and just say task runners and reconcilers?
No, I think we have
I mean,
to say you have to have the capability to build and deploy or deliver your application, but without delving too much into the details.
Okay.
I wouldn't
Maybe-
mention CI/CD. I think, could be confusing. They're really used a lot for different things, those terms.
Yeah.
But I think
Okay.
it's clear building and testing and delivering and verifying. I also like that they are split, because a new team onboarding on the platform, they could start just with the delivering and verifying part, and only afterwards also migrate the pipelines for building and testing onto the platform. So I really like that they're split there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like third-party apps, like, I'm just deploying Kafka. There isn't any building and testing. There's just this. So I like that. You're right.
A quick question relating to these. As far as management of like multiple environments, if like we've got dev stage, prod, QA, do we roll that up under one idea of the platform, or like is that something to consider for? Is the platform responsible for multiple environments, or just like a singular? Does that matter? You may have touched it previously. Sorry.
It's come up. There was actually someone had a note about it too, but it has come up along the way. There's a few places where we say both research, development, and production. I guess, yeah, we could say all of these things should apply to, like, this stuff should be usable for production environments too.
Yeah, I don't know that I would throw it in like 4 or 5, but just thinking about it, it comes down for me to the definition of like, what is your platform and how expansive is that, and what does it encapsulate? But because it could just be that the platform is the production system, right? And all the developers are free to just kind of like run their own solutions and things like that. But if they want to propose something, it needs to go to the platform team to introduce some new form of a CI/CD tool or something there. And then maybe that gets added to the platform, but they've got some other stuff going on. I was just curious if that prod versus dev mattered anywhere here.
That's super interesting, because I've always,
Environment management.
yeah, to this point, I've actually been thinking the reverse, that the platform is more about the developer experience, but you're saying it could be a platform is just for the production deployment.
Right.
Yeah.
To me,
not
that's the
included.
product management, right? What is the highest value? What is the thing that's worth building into your platform, and where do you draw the line of where it's not worth it anymore, right? Like, and that
Right.
can be very different for different organizations.
Right. And that's why I wasn't sure if it just made sense to call out some sort of thing related to environments here, because it will be a question.
I think we talk about in the capabilities and stuff, things about building up like test environments and things. I think it's interesting when you talk. So I was talking to someone who's a customer for Cradix. It's like when somebody requests a Redis, we need that to exist in every environment for them. And it's like, and other people, it's like, no, we want them to like request a Redis for an environment. And like,
Right.
so it's just, you kind of get those different experiences. And again, that's why, to me, the fact that we have the word product added earlier and the fact that that's something that we have as a common thread is like the thing that ties all this together. Now, whether or not executives that are reading this clock onto that quite as strongly, I don't know. But to me, that's the linchpin.
Yeah, it was Mike, when you asked the question earlier about where does Git go in the diagram, and I added a little comment about that. It's interesting because some people expect that the storage of their artifacts for code will be encapsulated within the platform, and then other people say, no, that doesn't belong here on GitOps, right? It just triggers an update. The platform is defined by the resource, by the artifacts, so that's actually somewhere else. And in that mindset, that's again, does the platform encompass everything, or does it like and all of my environments, including my artifacts for code, which then kind of blossom from within? Or is it, I have different platforms and the platform team is responsible for the makeup of those, but Git is still the single source of truth? And like just interesting from how different people define GitOps and where that journey starts.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I see a lot of those things as part of bullet number 5, perhaps. Once I have the capability to deliver and verify for one organization, that could be just production, or it could be going through staging and then have some kind of release candidate promotion step, or having a QA environment. Like once we have the capability, then it depends on the requirements, how we use that capability.
Right.
If it makes sense. I don't know if we want to add something more on that.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're saying, Thomas, is that as opposed to Colin is more talking about the composites and even suggesting maybe that the composites are a platform. Like Colin, I don't know if you were at the beginning of the call, but we have iterated on individual capabilities versus like more composites that can do, like artifact storage for you maybe is a kind of platform independent of the deployment platform. So this might be a level lower than what you've been thinking about, Colin, is kind of where I'm going. Like these are capabilities that you would aggregate into either a production environment, or if you wanted to consider, artifact or just separate domain, do you want to call it your artifact platform?
Yeah, it's to me too, there's not a clear answer for that. It's going to depend on, a multitude of opinions depending on who you're working with on that one. It's funny too, but thinking of the platform, I think about like GitLab. They're kind of trying to be the platform. And so the artifacts storage is an interesting part of that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that goes, we said at the very beginning that there's a bit of a continuum from individual to composite. And I think that's maybe what you're getting at. So let's try to integrate that somewhere a little more. Let's keep going because we're getting to time. This was one that we added, or that I've added in the past little while, like because of the feedback, like it's things like hosted IDEs, maybe even regular IDEs, remote connection tools like telepresence. Instrumentation and dashboards for observability. I think observability is a key one. I'm thinking we probably all agree on that one. Then I tried to group these. These are still the originals that I put in: infrastructure, data, messaging, just so they wouldn't get overwhelming. Infrastructure is compute runtime, so that would be Kubernetes namespaces, I don't know, VMs and things like that, if that's what people use, functions. Some sort of programmable network, and this is encapsulating a ton of stuff in one, service meshes and proxies and gateways and block storage. So that's just, infrastructure as a service, though. That's why I put it all in one. Data, I also just kind of encapsulated. And this might, another thing I was thinking with this whole section is that like this might inform work in our group, in the working group, future work. Like, let's talk about the data services, that are available, write a paper on them or write a blog post. Maybe more relevant when we get to like identity and secret, because we're going to find things that are like overlaps and stuff. Anyway, So that's another. So the data services are, I just put everything as a data service. Messaging is brokers, queues, and event fabrics is things like Knative eventing or, you know, EventBridge and Amazon. Yeah, so those are just like resource provisioning. Identity and secret, Rafa, you might have some thoughts on this, that I put these two together. But what I find, I guess why I put them together, is that secrets are often about providing an identity to the workload to connect to backing services. Like I have been thinking recently, like MTLS, if you had a good MTLS system, then you might not even need an API key, because, you know, it would know the identity of the caller. So that's why I kind of put these together, but, you know, I'm open to changing that. This is a pretty broad category also.
Does that cover, that probably covers policy management as well, the identity and secret?
Actually, I put it in security services. I put in security, static analysis, runtime analysis, and policy.
Policy enforcement versus policy definition. You see the stuff that's like with OPA, right?
Yeah.
And like Skyra and a lot of that stuff doing kind of like policy as code, but that finally reaching back to having consolidated IAM or like authorization across systems and services. So the idea is starting to come up like, okay, so I have maybe a platform that maybe I'm Elastic and I have Elastic Cloud, and it enables a user to create infrastructure, and the roles, like the role for a user to be able to create a new deployment also maps potentially to the back end, to that user is able to create a definition that spins up a new machine, or to get too into that, but that policy definition I think fits there.
Like authorization policies.
Yeah, and this is all like, it's becoming a more interesting topic lately, it seems, in app development, to consolidate into the infrastructure as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
APA gatekeeper.
But yeah, on the secret side, Josh, provisioning credentials to workloads, especially in a GitOps world, is a theme where, you know, is a place where you have to put a lot of thought, and especially when you're building a platform. And my experience is that you have to probably have this conversation at the beginning when you're laying the foundation of your platform. What you have here is fine, but there is really a lot to say in this space that probably doesn't belong in this paragraph. I would call it secret management service as opposed to secret services, because it's secret service. Like different.
right. We're protecting the president.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, good. If you're okay with that phrase, Raf, that's
I'm fine.
fine.
I'm fine. There is a tone, but sure.
And that is a good jumping off point to a paper about secrets and stuff next. I think the one other one, the artifact storage, is also, you might have opinions on the fact that I've combined everything. Container image, language specific, custom binaries, and source code, which is Git. I don't know. I put them all together to make it simple also. Are there some that should be split apart?
I like that you called it artifact here, or artifact here. I like artifact more than data up in the other diagram, personally.
Oh, is that what in the diagram itself it says data?
I think it says data. I was trying to figure out where Git goes.
Or artifacts and source.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry.
Repos. Oops.
Got it.
Oops.
I admit that I didn't read the document recently, but do we have a section for processes as opposed to processes that a platform needs to have, as opposed to, you know, this capability are in between technology and maybe a process? I'm not sure how to interpret that, but then in the table it's more about technology, right?
Yeah, it is more about product. Is it the use cases? Would that fit there?
I find that people that think about building a platform, they focus a lot on the products and technology they want to use, and they don't think about the processes that they want to enable. maybe, yes, maybe they are, maybe we call them use cases, but
Like we could add
It's once again
onboarding.
the product management, right? Like you have to
Yeah.
design the tech and the product to
Yeah.
enable the processes you want, and like
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
onboarding
absolutely
is
agree.
one. Is a big one, of course, right? Another one, like I was mentioning a second ago, you need to have a process for provisioning credential, no matter what the credential is, right? Can you unify that process and so it's always there?
Hmm.
In
I
the-
guess. Hmm. I guess I kind of think that falls in the process, falls in the capability.
Right. Okay, so if that's how we interpret that, then it's fine. I think
I think
it
there's
wasn't clear for me if this was more about the process or the message was you have to have a product to manage identity and to manage secrets, right? It's a little bit in between.
Are you commenting on the, so yeah, I guess the table, and we're at time and I want to be conscious of that. We do have another meeting that the WeG meeting is next week. So just to say, I think that I'll try in the next week to get these, each section maybe as a chunk in GitHub, or ready to go with that. And then we can start, we can skip to here if that's what we'd hope to do today, but, and pick this up again. So just want to like wrap on that, but we can keep talking. I still have time if people want to keep talking for a few minutes.
I was gonna say I think that's an extremely powerful future white paper for the group around, to me, the product management and the driving of how do you enable processes through your platform by creating the experiences around like this stuff, right? So as you suggested, like how do you create a secret, right, is a huge part of your secret process, your secret management process. So yeah, I think that's another really good example of a offshoot of this document in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, Raf has written a document like that on the Red Hat blog at some point. He dropped, so that's why
Nice.
I'm representing him. But that, yeah, I
Perfect.
would love to see, that could be our next thing, and it fits with our group too. Any thoughts on the table itself? Should we have this table? Is it helpful? Is it distracting?
Appendix it in some way. I don't know how we're gonna package this up, right? Like, is it gonna be a PDF? Is it gonna be a what? But yeah, I don't know. Maybe appendix.
I mean, for me, like I put those projects down to kind of help. It's just another way to help people understand what we're talking about. But you know, it also distracts people. They're like, why is my project not on there? And things like that. Like, so, okay. So the feedback is,
Yeah, I see the value as
Yeah.
yeah, it helps understand better the capability. Perhaps we can change the name and on the third column, just as examples of projects.
Yeah.
That's
So
a good-
like not comprehensive list, but just to give examples so I can understand better what the capability is about, and perhaps will be covered in a dedicated paper later on.
yeah. And you know what? That's a good point. Maybe we call that out, put a sentence to do what is the purpose of this table, and it's just another perspective to help with understanding, to guide understanding.
Yeah, some people like pictures, some people like paragraphs, some people like tables. Like they'll,
Yeah, this goes straight into a product map, like a logo map.
just link to CNCF.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Filter it to what the word. Yeah. Quick question for y'all. Where do you think like something like OpenCost would go in this list? Because like it's not quite
Yeah. It's not
in
there,
structure. So, I mean, maybe it's kind of observed. That's an opinion thing. I was just curious if you guys had a thought on where that would go.
To me, this is the thing around platforms that are so interesting, is the power of a platform is not just the codifying of what a user needs, but it's also the like codifying of what a user needs, which is, I think we had a comment about this up above, Josh, which meets business expectations and builds in the business requirements. So no user is gonna be like, hey, can you use OpenCost for me? Right? But like the platform needs to own that. And like, how does a platform build in OpenCost to every request that gets made? How do they attribute it correctly? How do they validate it? I'm not
Cool.
too familiar with OpenCost. I might be speaking a bit off, but I made assumptions based on the name.
Yeah, OpenCost is, it's like intelligent cost monitoring for infrastructure, for your infrastructure. So it like tells you how much your workload costs out of the overall, like how much your node costs and stuff
It's
like that.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, we use it
Yeah.
as an intelligence tool for developers to understand how to right size. So like we provide developers access to that so they, you know, understand how to meet business expectations with their compute. And the resources they request. And so that's cool, like when that gets pulled into the platform. But to me, it's observability, but I just don't think that they would necessarily want it to be under that bucket, but that's just where I would put it.
Yeah, but you're making a
think-
point of, sorry, go on, Thomas, my bad.
Yeah, I was saying I would vote to add that capability that is actually quite critical because we have all these self-service capabilities, and as a product team, I can go and provision anything that I want, but someone has to pay for that, and it's my team. So having that kind of visibility called out explicitly, not behind observability, I think would be really good.
Yeah. I
Arguably,
like that you
like,
pointed that it fits in observability though. That is interesting.
arguably, we have 13 capabilities, which is starting to get a bit like stressful, right? If we're trying to encourage people to do this. But arguably, infrastructure, data, messaging, even identity and secrets, like arguably there's one category which is like stuff. I can get you the stuff like that. The capability of the platform is the ability to deliver you infrastructure of whatever you need. Examples being compute, data, messaging, etc. And then actually the other
Example.
capability of the platform is to like codify business requirements, right? Like
Yeah.
and that's where then all of a sudden this table becomes an extremely powerful add-on, right? Because you basically completely squash this list to like what it's like to the fact that it can do infrastructure and examples of infrastructure, see table below, and then like now we have all these infrastructures that it can deliver and so forth. But it would completely change the tone of the table. So it's something, or the tone of this list. So I think it's something that definitely is worth a bit of thought. And I can't say that at 8:07 p.m. that's something I have deep ability to do right now, but it's an interesting direction possibly.
Yeah, I like your point on the messaging services part because like I'd almost argue when I'm looking at NATs, right? That to me, that's almost at the application layer. And I don't even consider that a part of the platform in some cases, unless it's used in some functional way as part of the platform itself. So it's just curious to think about it that way in my head sometimes. Like it's not, the application layer isn't necessarily still the platform. Like there can be a separation of concerns there.
I definitely could hear these somehow, if that's appropriate. But I want to noodle on what you just said, Abby, too, like the codify, and maybe that's elaborating on the composites. Maybe there's room to do that even in this doc, like codifying business patterns. You know, maybe we can give an example of that. Think about that.
Would you combine networking and messaging as like kind of like one thing, like your service mesh and stuff like that? Like, or does that fall under infrastructure?
I would say they're pretty different. Like messaging is a more application level concern, and I mean, I guess network a little bit, but that's
Perhaps data and messaging could be combined there. Maybe I would
Yeah.
leave infrastructures separate.
yeah. I would more support that, I think. Because messaging is really just a kind of data. It's more, I feel like network is less structured. It's a lower level, you know, packets and connections, and messaging is about how do I transfer a readable, usable message between applications. You know, with TCP is kind of breaks that down into how it goes on the wire, and we could think about it. Okay, we're way over, so I think we're gonna wrap up now. Thank you all so much. Let's keep working on this, and yeah, we'll meet again next week, and I'm gonna try to figure out a way to start getting this into GitHub.
Amazing. Thank you,
Great.
Josh.
Thank you.
for
Have
everything.
a great day.
Yeah, thank you all. I'll
Bye.
talk to you soon.
Have a good day/night.
Yeah, have a good night,
You.
Abby. Bye.